My Govanen, one and all, and welcome to the Literary Baptists. I'm Lee, joined this evening by Nick and Maddie. How are you both this evening?
Good. It's a good evening.
Fantastic.
Fantastic, same as always. Zachary has not joined us because he doesn't really read books, or at least doesn't read real books. And we're having a miscellany episode wherein we talk about our own personal reading. So he's going to go play RPGs or something. I don't know what he does, but we're going to talk about the books we've been reading lately. So, Nick, would you like to start?
Yeah, I would. So I don't remember what ones we were talking about last time, but I've read a few books recently, and one of my favorites is just this little volume that I got. I think I got it from Reformation Heritage Books, but it is the life and writings of Reverend John Gill, and it's really small. I think it was like $5, but his life is such an interesting life, I guess. Really intelligent, became the big Baptist, the one who's defending believers' baptism during this time, the mid 18th century, and I think he needs to come back into Baptist thought and regain that place.
Yes.
This biography seems to completely reject it. It's written by his successor in the church there in London, John Rippon, but it says not a hyper Calvinist, which is what I had always assumed, because people said that he was a hyper Calvinist. I was like, oh well, then I'm no thanks. But sounds like he isn't. Hopefully he wasn't. I haven't read all of his works. I've read this, but
yeah, I haven't read it all either, but that is the majority opinion of people that I know who have actually read Gill have said this hyper Calvinism thing isn't a fact.
Yeah, it's interesting how that happens sometimes. Like, we have these figures and we think, oh yeah, this, and it's like, where did you even get that from?
Yeah.
And I think sometimes, like, minority opinions, especially when you push them, when you're going, secondary literature will make claims and then people will say, yep, that's gospel, and then it just moves forward. But people who actually read the primary literature, I'm saying this as a hypocrite because I've literally just said I only read second. I read a biography. But I think that is probably the best way to get to understand somebody, is to actually read what they wrote. So
I read some of his commentary, and
yeah.
I was surprised when I heard people say that he was a hyper Calvinist.
Yeah,
that had to be like put in my head, not from his actual writing, but somebody else had to say it for me to be like, oh, okay, maybe at some point he was a hyper Calvinist.
Yeah, and maybe he was. Maybe at some point he was. I don't know. I didn't. His successor, John Rippon, who is kind of funny. He talks about Gill and he's just like, he ate chocolate for breakfast. It's like, first of all, it's a detail that none of us needed to know, that he ate chocolate for breakfast.
Yeah.
But it's so funny.
But I like knowing it now.
And he included a story about him kind of ribbing a Presbyterian. Him and a Presbyterian going back and forth about, like, oh, you like to have, a lot of water because there was flooding or something. And he's like, oh, you like a lot of water. This is kind of your thing, isn't it? It's just them kind of going back and forth about it. It's just, it's a good little, it's very thin. It's very small. And I thought it was really interesting.
I'm glad you mentioned Gill. I'm going to try to put this in the notes, but Particular Baptist Heritage Books has produced and is continuing to produce a multi-volume set of Gill's works. Looks like there's already volumes 1 and 2 out, and there's more to come. But yeah, so my friend Jeremy, who hosts a wonderful podcast, he sent me the link. And I kind of want to invest in these. Oh, his podcast is Ordinary Fellowship as well. Nice little plug there. But I'll put this in the notes. If there's anybody who's interested in actually reading the man and not just listening to what people say about him, these would be really high quality sets that actually look nice. Like the printing looks nice. So I'll put a link in the notes.
My theme for the books that I've read recently is misconceptions. And the second one that I have
was that intentional, or did it just come out that way?
I just made this up right now. But it applies for 3 of them. I can make something up for the other ones. The second thing is I read C.S. Lewis's The Great Divorce, which I read. This is a reread for me. I read it a long time ago, and I remember thinking, like, his idea of hell is not the traditional view at all, which it is. I mean, the hell in this book is not, it's not the biblical one. It just isn't. But at the very beginning and the very end, he says, this is not even really what I believe, so he clarifies that this is not what he actually thinks heaven and hell are like. I think the main point of this book, The Great Divorce, is about the kind of attitudes you find among people in hell, basically. Like what kind of attitudes keep you from the gospel. And it's selfishness, it's focus on, novelty or science, or, there are different things that he kind of deals with different people, but you see it. And I think it's a great novel if you can get over the fact that it is basically a fantasy, that it has no connection to the real world. I think it's a great novel. Or novella. It's pretty short. I've read some other books lately, like The Scarlet Pimpernel. Fun. Really fun. I enjoyed it quite a bit. The French Revolution, it's just like one of my things. I just enjoy it. So, but
it's
one
enjoyable
of them,
to read about, but probably not great to be there at the time.
No, I wouldn't want to be there. No, personally, no desire. But I enjoy reading about it. French Revolution is great for basically, I mean, it's an important period because it shows the excesses of liberalism in its very early form. The third of these, which Maddie is going to have to contribute to, is Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, which I had no idea that it was going to be this good. It's in my top 10 right now. I'm pretty sure that it's one of my favorites. I had been so ingrained, like the pop culture Frankenstein's monster had, like, Frankenberry or whatever, like the guy who's on the cereal box, or Young Frankenstein or whatever. Like these things had been in my mind, but I never actually read the thing. And it's great, and it has no connection to it. Like the monster in pop culture, he's like, me like cat, me hurt people, or whatever. He's like dumb. But this monster, he's like reading Paradise Lost and like learning French and like spying on people for like years.
He's not the monster from Young Frankenstein singing "Putting on the Ritz."
No, he's like more articulate than Dr. Frankenstein is.
Yeah, he really is.
Yeah. And he really knows how to lament too.
Yeah, he does.
And he doesn't look anything like, when I read it, he doesn't look anything like the big green monster with 2 bolts in his neck.
Yeah.
No. They never talk about bolts in his neck.
It describes his skin as like yellowish and his eyes like the same color. I don't know. It's just like not the same. at
The
all.
Penguin
Like a
Classics has
reanimated cadaver, after all.
this kind of a
Yeah.
yellowish figure on the front.
hmm
I don't know who that's supposed to be.
I'm curious, is that a painting of Prometheus?
I thought it was, but I have no idea. Probably.
That'd have been really
Um,
cool if they went that direction.
I'm sure that they would.
I read
But he
Frankenstein in
was-
high school, and I remember loving it. But there's not a ton that I remember, and now you're making me want to read it again.
It's worth it.
I read it in, well, I don't even know if I could consider myself reading it in high school. I probably read the Spark Notes in high school.
Oh man,
That's my it's been
I think you're
so
fired.
long, can't even remember. I was just super over. It's sad now, like I don't know if I would have appreciated my English class had I took it now. I'm not really sure because we had to take quizzes on the books and
Mhm.
stuff, and I feel like that just
Wrong.
kind of ruins
Yep.
ruins the experience.
And English teachers focus on the dumbest things too.
Yeah.
It's
But so
oh,
like they're
all
making
right.
like the books that we had to read generally were good books. Like Jane Eyre, I
Mhm.
hated Jane Eyre, but
Mhm.
I love it now. We had to read Frankenstein my sophomore year, and I remember absolutely hating it. But I don't know if I read it because it wasn't like familiar. Like Jane Eyre at least was familiar to me when I reread it. But it didn't, and maybe I just wasn't understanding. Like maybe I had preconceived notions like when's the green monster coming in? You know? I don't know.
Is there another monster that's green and has bolts in his neck?
Frankenstein apparently.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
a
not
whole other
that's not the
thing.
doctor's name, but
Yeah.
um
Yeah. I did not.
Hmm.
I also, that's why Nick brought it up. He and I read it around the same time. That was my reread for this year. Since we read Dracula
Oh,
last year, which
yeah.
was also a reread, I was like, well, just seems like the right time of year to try to read one of these monster books.
Yeah.
So I picked up Frankenstein as well. But it's not in my top 10. I'll say that.
Really?
And I wouldn't even say that I loved it, but I was very impressed by it. I just couldn't help but I just kept thinking like an 18-year-old girl in the beginning of the 1800s wrote this. And that
Yeah,
I think maybe that
I think you're
distracted
required
me
to
a little
love
bit.
it just simply because, support women.
Yeah. I support
Girl
women.
boss.
I thought it was interesting that she wrote like from the masculine perspective.
hmm
Because like Jane Austen's the other way around. Like she never ever
Yeah, her novels are
writes.
very feminine.
Yeah, and she doesn't write from the masculine point of view. She'll quote them, but she doesn't ever give you like Darcy's perspective.
Yeah, yeah.
This was the other way around.
They're always coming from a woman's mind.
All three of the main characters that you get their perspective in Frankenstein, they're men.
Yeah.
The fellas.
I'm hoping I didn't make this up, but
The women are barely in it.
Yeah.
It fails the Bechdel test. Did the novel, maybe I'm making this up, didn't the novel get initially published under Percy Shelley's name?
I believe it was like some kind of pseudonym.
Yeah.
And
but
he denied that it was him right away. He did edit it. Like they have I guess they have manuscripts or something, and it's clear that he wrote some parts. But I think most people will say, yeah, Mary wrote the majority of it.
What version did you guys read? Was it the 1818 or the later one? I'm curious what the differences would be.
So mine is the Penguin Classics version. I think it's collated. I think it's both.
Oh, cool.
And they in the back have a thing that, like, one of the appendices is, here are the differences. And I just kind of skimmed through it. And other than a few sections in the first part, like the farther along you get into it, the differences between the two versions are nothing. It's like 5 or 6 pages in this book of differences, and some of them are essentially not differences at all, like changing the word crime to vice. Okay,
Oh,
you know,
okay, whatever.
changing sins to deeds.
I'm
The
sure she wanted
beings
to
of my own
de-Christianize it.
species to my fellow creatures. They're some of them are minor changes. Doesn't really matter, I don't think. There's one long passage that's different, but I don't think it adds anything.
Interesting.
Some of the main one of the main themes that I kept. So I also read Paradise Lost this year, and the number of times Paradise Lost is mentioned or quoted in this is kind of shocking, actually. But it makes sense because, you know, the monster is like a second Adam, a bad second Adam, not the real second Adam.
Good clarification.
Like a third Adam, I guess.
Yeah.
So he's like a second Adam, bad second Adam, and he wants a helper. He wants, you know, to have someone to help him. He hasn't been able to find that amongst the humans or anybody else, and so he asks his creator to do that. His creator says, "No thanks." And the idea of marriage is a huge part of this that I wasn't really expecting. And he wants an Eve. And for a little bit, I thought it doesn't work out for the time, but I thought maybe Mary Shelley wrote this and was trying to convince Percy that they should actually get married instead of just being like, the euphemism we use with our kids sometimes is that they're pretending to be married.
Oh, that's
they
a
were
good
doing
one.
that. Yeah, they were doing that for a little while before they actually got married.
Yeah.
And then she did write this, it looks like, after. But my thought was, when I was reading it, I thought that it was written before, and I was thinking maybe she wrote this to try to say, hey, it's very important for a man to have a wife. That actually is another connection to Jane Austen. Isn't that the beginning of Pride and Prejudice?
The first line of Pride and Prejudice, yeah.
Yeah. So that was my thought, is what this is actually. So Frankenstein is basically Pride and Prejudice. That's all I'm trying to say.
But in reverse.
Yeah.
The tragedy.
Yeah,
Pride and Prejudice,
it's like a
the
tragic
tragedy.
version.
Yeah. Kind of what the underlying theme I got from it was ideas have consequences. It's just, you know, he gets wrapped up in his idea and his scheme, and he gets so sucked into it, and that's like, it's like recounted in the beginning of it. It's like, had I known, there was like so much like heavy foreshadowing throughout the whole thing, that you kind of knew it was going to happen, but I didn't want it to happen.
It's very Jurassic Park.
I'm
like
a romantic, I guess.
We spent too much time thinking about whether we could do it and not thinking if we should.
Exactly. That's really that's really the story. Yeah, he does it, and then his whole life is destroyed because of it. So that, I don't know, it was just an interesting thought. Of course, I wanted to like infuse or insert wokeism here, insert feminism here. Obviously, it was never like one, and that's way before her time. I don't think she had any sort of idea.
Right at the beginning of the start of the feminist
her mom
movement.
Was the feminist woman.
Yeah.
But to foresee like the downfall of feminism, no. And I don't think that's what she had in mind. And I haven't done a whole lot. I've heard and I've read stuff about different philosophy and their influence on that, but I resisted the temptation to go and read about it ahead of time, because I just wanted to experience the book without any like preconceived notions.
Yeah.
So that's just kind of generally what I took from it. The marriage thing was interesting, and she did a good job of guilting me, making me feel bad for the monster. I was like, just make him a wife.
He's so sympathetic.
He's lonely.
Yeah, you really feel for the guy.
I felt bad for him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No,
I'm part of the problem.
But then he's also like murdering people, and it's like,
Yeah, I'm like I'm part of the problem, I guess.
they deserved it.
I'm the
There's-
compromising Christian.
there's a story, and I don't know what it's called, but it's by Evelyn Waugh, who's one of my favorite authors. And I'm gonna probably get some details wrong because it's been like 5 years since I read this, but it's about there's a guy who's in an insane asylum because he murdered somebody, and this woman comes to volunteer, and she convinces the people there. She's convinced that this guy is innocent, that he has reformed, and that it is time for him to be released. And she goes through this whole process to get him released. He goes, they let him go free, and then as she's going to the insane asylum to help with some other folks, inmates there, the man that she helped free goes and kills her. And then he just goes back to the insane asylum. And kind of the point is like this, sometimes we can think too well of people, and think that we're making changes when we're not necessarily doing that, and we're actually contributing to the problem. I mean, the Trollops the Warden, which is actually my favorite book, it has kind
The
of a
novel
similar
was
thing.
so good.
Yeah, there's a character
Yeah.
who's trying to do good things. He's trying to
Yep.
make the world a better place, and he screws things up because
Mhm.
people are fallible.
Yep.
People are not
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's something that I really took away. Just like this book has made me think more about like how we support different causes and in this world, just like not understanding the consequences. And then that, like I said, I've felt pity for the
Mhm.
monster who's
Mhm.
pleading, and he is a monster. He's a murderer, and
Yeah.
he's capable of all this terrible, plotting, but he does a good job of making you feel bad. And
Mhm.
I just remember being like, wow, I'm so gullible.
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
reading this book, and here it turns out like, oh, he's just murdering like children and women,
Mhm. Yeah.
and then here I am like, oh, sad. So, but it's so easy to get, and that's why I was just kind of thinking of like ideologies of the day, that you can get sentimental and get caught up, and it's hard for any of us to really know like where some
Yeah.
idea is gonna end up.
Well, and I think kind of behind that story a little bit is sort of the enlightenment, somewhat enlightenment idea of people as a tabula rasa, where he kind of is born in sort of a morally neutral phase, and then gets twisted by the events that happen to him. And that's very, I mean, there's a whole worldview there, of people only become evil because society acts upon them. And that makes them, so inside that worldview, that makes them a more sympathetic character. They couldn't help it. They made him evil. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And there, I guess I can tie back a little bit into some wokeism type stuff, but that was one of the things I took away, was kind of so when I read it in high school, we read it in homeschool co-op, and we read Frankenstein and then Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde as like a unit.
Mm.
And so, and kind of the purpose of that was to compare and contrast the view of man presented by Shelley, Mary Shelley, and then what's his name? Robert Louis Stevenson's view of man, where he's a complete man, and then turns more evil when Dr. Hyde comes out, or Mr. Hyde comes out. But the Frankenstein is born neutral, or created neutral, whatever you want to call what happened, and then is made evil by external forces coming from outside. And then Mr. Hyde is coming out from the inside of Dr. Jekyll. And it was just interesting. That really stuck with me, and being able to kind of do a compare and contrast of just that one theme. And that's been kind of enduring. But no, but when I read Frankenstein, I found him very sympathetic. And there was one of his many soliloquies from the book I used as a tryout for a play. Actually, I had to do a monologue, and he does a lot of monologuing, so I had a lot to choose from. But lot of pathos in there.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
I loved it. I went back and forth between reading a physical version and an audiobook, and the audiobook version that I had was top notch.
Really?
Yeah.
Who read
I
it?
thought he did
Which
a great
one did
job.
you do?
That's a great question.
Look it up. I want to link it.
I will
Do the
look it up.
work. Do better. You're on a podcast.
It was through our library we have the Hoopla thing, and it was the free one. I didn't pay for it.
Yeah,
Whoa.
I did mine through Libby. It, and maybe it was the audiobook, because I did the same thing. I read it in print and did audio, and I didn't feel like sitting. Maybe it was because it was a British guy narrating it, but it did make me think of The Count of Monte Cristo. That book is so like fresh in my mind, but just the theme of vengeance that kind of undergirds a lot of Monte Cristo, and kind of how he's like the victim of all these bad things happening to him, and then kind of going on this elaborate scheme. And just, I'm noticing that there's just this big emphasis on books in that time period of like traveling to and fro, sailing to and fro. It just seems to be like a really prominent plot mechanism in that general time frame.
That just
seemed
that
familiar.
kind of travel was more available to more people, and so it ends up in the
Well,
literature.
I think it was almost like new. It was like a new thing, because in Monte Cristo, it's treated like he's this rich guy who can.
Oh.
So it just kind of, I don't know. I think it's a new. It was just something that I
Lifestyles
noticed.
of the rich and famous.
Obviously, I mean, Monte Cristo was written later, after, because I was like in the 40s, I think, 1840s. So it reminded me.
The audio book version that I listened to was, the reader was Gildart Jackson, and it was done by Dreamscape Media. I thought it was very good. It's unabridged, so
the only
it's
option.
pretty long.
Never listen or read an unabridged book.
Well, the part of the problem is that sometimes you have to kind of do research.
Yeah.
Because it won't say this is unabridged. So you have to kind of see, like, okay, there are some that are like 6 hours long, some that are 10, or some that are even 3 or whatever. So I had to kind of do some research into whether it was or wasn't. So frustrating. I don't know why abridged stuff exists.
Yeah, it just shouldn't exist.
Exactly.
Make a Spark Notes or a Cliff's Notes, and then do the real book.
Yeah, I'm okay with burning books as long as they're abridged.
They're good fire starters, even if they're smaller than the original article.
Yeah. I mean, can you imagine if we had like something passed down to us, like Beowulf, and we didn't actually have Beowulf, but we had like an abridged version, and then for the rest of time, we're like, what was cut out? Like, what did they cut out?
Yeah.
Or, this or that.
Yeah, it's one thing if you get like a little bit of a manuscript that got like part of it got lost, but to intentionally cut something out and gut the legacy of that work.
Sickos.
It should be the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not abridge a wonderful an excellent work of,
especially in audiobooks. Like, not that it doesn't matter in written, but like audiobooks, like, why?
Like, did you not want to pay the actor to read the extra 3 hours or whatever? Like, there's no reason.
It's so frustrating too, because I like to alternate if I can between audio and text, but if I accidentally get, I'll catch it and I'm like, what is going on? This is not matching up at all. Now I know why. It's very frustrating.
Ugh. All right, Maddie, what have you been reading?
Well, I read Frankenstein.
Wow, I had no idea. You should tell us about that.
That's the one I recently finished, and I'm just kind of in this place in my life where I'm in the middle of different books. I have started many, and I am working my way through many. I'm reading Confessions. I started
Augustine.
Yeah, I started reading Trusting God by Jerry Bridges, which is fantastic, by the way. If you are struggling with trusting God, going through a hard season, or just know that you're like me and have lots of anxiety, fantastic book.
I just got back from a Fire Fellowship regional event about suffering and affliction, and that one book was recommended by at least two of the speakers
Yeah,
at different
so
times.
good.
It's
So far he's dealt very well with just addressing the sovereignty of God and how the sovereignty of God plays into situations. And I think sometimes that's scary. I know it is for me, like it shouldn't be, but it is in a way, because you're like, okay, well, I know he's sovereign, but that also means that like I don't have any control over the situation, and who knows what he's gonna ask me to go through. I remember reading the Martin Lloyd-Jones book, The Spiritual Depression, and he had a chapter about that, where it's sometimes you're just like, you're aware that you will go through trials, and that can be a cause for anxiety in and of itself. But Jerry Bridges is just so pastoral and very tender. I think it's a good book.
He's one of the most approachable Calvinist authors out there. He and Sproul, both gone to glory now, I think are two of the most approachable Calvinist authors I've ever read.
I don't think someone would walk away from reading his book and being like, Calvinist jerk guy is beating me over the head with sovereignty of God. He just does it in such a biblical and compassionate way, but then warns you, like you do have to be careful with how you talk about this stuff to somebody who's going through hard times. And he's very aware of that. And I think that's good, because we can sometimes, be a little insensitive with our timing. Like, God is sovereign. I know your husband just died. Yeah. So far I'm enjoying that, but it's not one that I wanted to necessarily rush through. So I'm reading that, and then I'm reading the second James Harriet book, because I finished All Creatures Great and Small a while back and I missed it. So I've started that, but it's sitting waiting for me to read more of Trusting God. And then I just started today Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. Yeah. That book is good so far. I am hooked instantly.
That is a messed up story
hooked.
too.
I don't know anything about it.
You've never seen the film?
Absolutely. Nope. No, I'm completely ignorant to this. I'm just kind of in a mood to just like go into things blindly right now.
Yeah, when you're done with Rebecca, you need to see the Hitchcock film. Legitimately, like
that's what I want. I really want to do that, because I'm very curious how he depicted this so far. I'm only like 6 chapters in.
Yeah.
But she's very descriptive in her writing, but very engaging, like from page 1, word 1. So
I need to read
and
it.
I keep finding myself reading books that are like early 1900s, like kind of pre-World War II. It's not intentional, but
that's like one of the best periods of novels. For novels, like the height is like before World War II.
It's a good era.
I think Victorian novelists are good, but sometimes a little bit too long. And so that was like the height. But then
when they quit publishing their novels chapter by chapter in the periodicals, the novels got a little bit better.
Yeah. And with a little bit of like consciousness of World War I for some of them, like, and it's just as a history person, I am just fascinated socially, just the commentary like that you're getting, they're unconscious of what's looming ahead. Like they're writing about a time where they're looking back on World War I, not yet knowing what's ahead, but then we do. So you have this like very interesting perspective. And it's just, I'm finding that in and of itself kind of a fun activity to read different, whether fiction or nonfiction. Very fascinating. So there you have it.
So cool. It's funny you mentioned that because so I went on vacation, went to Florida. It was a nice time. Went to Key West for a
King of
couple
States.
days. Yes, I have to admit, even as a proud Ohioan, I think Florida's number
Florida's the best. I don't live in Florida anymore, but Florida's the best.
And so I went to the Hemingway house there where he wrote a ton of books, and Hemingway's probably the most modern author that I like. It's pretty much the novels I've read that are newer than his work are the novels that I haven't cared for that much. So I think he's the most modern that I can handle. And I bought a copy of The Sun Also Rises there, which is his first novel. And it was like it was a new kind of updated edition that had some older manuscripts worked into it as well, so that was partially what was in my mind when I asked about what version of Frankenstein you read, because it does seem like now there are newer, not necessarily for an anniversary of a publication date or something, but just like, oh, we found more papers, and then they weave them in or put them in as like a supplement in the back and then republish it. And so I bought a new paper copy of The Sun Also Rises and enjoyed starting to read that, but I'm gonna take my time. I've actually read that novel several times, so I'm not in a rush to finish it again. What I did finish was this was my my church father book from the reading challenge, On God and Christ by Gregory of Nazianzus. I've been wanting to get into the patristics, both Nicene and pro-Nicene. And so this was kind of the first foray into it. And I really, really enjoyed this was the five theological orations. In my book also had the two letters to Cledonius, but I didn't read those. I just read the five orations. I counted that as a finish because that's usually how it's printed. But the argumentation, the logical flow, like these were sermons, but they're very like logical treatises about really important concepts, and they're very polemical. Like he's like naming not only individuals but like camps of opponents, addressing their arguments, bringing up arguments that he would assume he would hear from them if he was in a debate in that moment. Just really, really interesting and helpful. And I wish there were, I want to make sure I say it right. I wish that the good theologians that we have today would produce similar things against, heterodox or even false teachings within the visible church in this style. I think it would be really helpful for our discourse.
There is like this style of sermon, like what we have today as our sermons is very different from what sermons looked like back in the day, the old folks' times. I'm going to talk about something right now that's like 1,000 years later, but so
do it because I'm trying to find.
I edited a transcript of Jonathan Edwards' sermon for Revived Thoughts, which is a good podcast that includes sermons from the past.
You read one of his sermons, or were you listening?
No, I edited. I got it ready to be read.
Nice.
And they're meticulous. They focus. Any little argument that they can perceive against, it's every little bit is included in there, and actually made it quite hard to edit to be delivered verbally, because it was more like a theological work than what I consider to be a sermon. It had application points, but they were in a very different way than I expect a sermon to be. So I don't, I don't think that we necessarily need to take that back entirely, but I do think that some of that could be brought back. I mean, particularly if you're going to talk about just kind of a mainstream evangelical like mega church, they definitely need more like hardcore theology.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a good merger of what we have now and some of that the polemical, the really thought through kind of stuff, I think could be good.
Yeah,
So
would be good. I have a long quote if you would indulge me to read it. One of the things that people have criticized church fathers of this era is a lot of allegorical theology. Like they don't shy away from an allegory and tying things together allegorically, or doing partitive exegesis. But there was a really powerful so in these there's sort of like their sections are numbered out, and so this is oration 29, section 20. And I just thought it was really, so he's gone through this whole thing, done this logical breakdown about important aspects of Christology in this speech, in this sermon, and this is right near the end. So he's like kind of bringing it all together and sort of painting a picture, and I thought it was really powerful. As man, he was baptized, but he absolved sins as God. He needed no purifying rites himself. His purpose was to hallow water. As man, he was put to the test, but as God, he came through victorious. Yes, bids us be of good cheer, because he has conquered the world. He hungered, yet he fed thousands. He is indeed living heavenly bread. He thirsted, yet he exclaimed, "Whoever thirsts, let him come to me and drink." Indeed, he promised that believers would become fountains. He was tired, yet he is the rest of the weary and the burdened. He was overcome by heavy sleep, yet he goes lightly over the sea, rebukes winds, and relieves the drowning Peter. He pays tax, yet he uses a fish to do it. Indeed, he's emperor over those who demand the tax. He's called a Samaritan, demonically possessed, but he rescues the man who came down from Jerusalem and fell among thieves. Yes, he's recognized by demons, drives out demons, drowns deep a legion of spirits, and sees the prince of demons falling like lightning. He's stoned, yet not hit. He prays, yet he hears prayer. He weeps, yet he puts an end to weeping. He asks where Lazarus is laid. He was man, yet he raises Lazarus. He was God. He is sold, and cheap was the price, 30 pieces of silver. Yet he buys back the world at the mighty cost of his own blood. A sheep he's led to the slaughter, yet he shepherds Israel, and now the whole world as well. A lamb, he is dumb, yet he is word, proclaimed by the voice of one crying in the wilderness. He's weakened, wounded, yet he cures every disease and every weakness. He's brought up to the tree and nailed to it, yet by the tree of life he restores us. Yes, he saves even a thief crucified with him. He wraps all the visible world in darkness. He's given vinegar to drink, gall to eat. And who is he? Why, one who turned water into wine, who took away the taste of bitterness, who is all sweetness and desire. He surrenders his life, yet he has power to take it again. Yes, the veil is rent, for things of heaven are being revealed. Rocks split, and dead men have an earlier awakening. He dies, but he vivifies, and by death destroys death. He's buried, yet he rises again. He goes down to Hades, yet he leads souls up, ascends to heaven, and will come to judge quick and dead, and to probe discussions like these. If the first set of expressions starts you going astray, the second set takes your error away. I just thought that was so legit. As we say, like, based.
he sounds like a serious Chesterton with the like this, but this, and both are true.
Yeah.
The paradox kind of stuff.
Yep. Yeah. So yeah, cool passage. I read that on the sunny beaches of Florida and was edified. On the flight there, and it was kind of a weird experience. I've
You see
owned the
somebody
Epic
wasn't
of
real?
I did
Oh,
well no there all the people on the plane were real. I will guarantee you that.
okay, good.
So that guy and the rest of them were definitely real. Um I've owned the Epic of Gilgamesh on my Kindle for years and never read it. And it was like almost the exact right length for the flight. And so I read about 80% of the Epic of Gilgamesh on my Kindle on a plane. And I just thought that was the weirdest juxtaposition of like one of the oldest extant pieces of literature. And I'm reading it in this very, very modern context. And I really enjoyed that. That Epic of Gilgamesh is bonkers. I took so many notes. And especially like given, we kind of had our blurry creature spiritual warfare type discussion there a few episodes ago, and like it's kind of hard to take notes on a Kindle. Like it's not exactly easy, but like I was like, oh man, this and this and uh giants and Uruk and going to the underworld, and yeah, it was. I definitely want to read it again. I want to finish the challenge books and stuff, but that's one I'm definitely next year I'm going back and camping out on. That was very, very interesting. And then I just finished on my now road trip I just came back from, Out of the Silent Planet. And I think I confessed to you guys, I really struggled with it. I started reading it on Kindle, and my Kindle told me I was 15% in, and I'm like, maybe I quit this and I'm gonna pick a different Inkling book. I'm like, I was bored and not looking forward to picking it up again. And then I knew I was going to be in the car for 6 hours, and so I had the audiobook, and so I turned the audiobook on, and what do you know? Basically, as soon as I played the audiobook from where I left off in the Kindle book, it all got really interesting. And I was riveted for the next like 4 hours listening to it just straight through.
Where did you like leave off initially?
Um, where I left off, Ransom had just landed on Malacandra, and he
Mm.
was like, noticing like the color of the water and the plants and stuff, and nothing had happened. Like, Divine and Weston had disappeared with their rifle and gone elsewhere, and he was alone, and there was no one around, nothing going on, and I think it's the way people feel when Tolkien is describing like a copse of trees, you know. Oh, where's this going? And now I feel guilty for feeling that way. I doubted C.S. Lewis was going to tell me a good story, but oh, me of little faith.
It's, I don't know. I was intimidated by the space trilogy because I am very impressionable when people don't like stories. That was what kept me from reading Lord of the Rings for a long time, was because people told me, oh, it's so long, it's so hard to read, it's so boring. And I remember before I started the trilogy, I looked up like a blog and they were like, The Two Towers is such a drag. It's a labor
Oh,
of love.
whatever.
Yeah, and so I read it and I was like, this is my favorite book. I love Two Towers.
Yeah,
And
whatever the
and
opposite of sophomore slump is, that is what Two Towers is.
yes, it's
It is so strong.
fantastic. But I remember watching the extended version of Two Towers, the movie, and being like, what is going on with these
Yeah.
trees? Like, I just didn't have
Yeah.
any because I saw it before I ever read the book.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
Decades.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah. So I was like, what is going on? Why are they talking so slow? I don't understand.
Yeah.
But the ends, I guess it wasn't the trees.
And the movie is kind of backwards too compared to the book. Like
Yeah.
they kind of took the parts of the Two Towers novel and then rearranged the parts to make it a movie.
Yeah.
Which is probably, to be honest, it was probably the right choice to do that. Helm's
Yeah.
Deep makes a really great climax to a movie and not like the first action that's done. Like that novel basically starts with a war
Yeah.
and then goes on from there. But
I
it
would say
works.
that's
It
like
works in the book.
one of the things that I appreciate about the movies versus the book is that it intersperses the story, the plot.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not a complaint. I don't have a complaint against the book. I just like that they didn't
Yeah.
do that in the movie.
Yeah.
Because it would have felt very disjointed.
Mm-hmm.
I'll make a
Yeah.
complaint about Lord of the Rings. And this applies mostly to Two Towers.
Tread lightly, Padawan.
I cared less about Frodo. I love the other stories way
yeah.
more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, we're getting to Frodo. All right.
Yeah.
His plot line's only
felt-
interesting because it's so crucial to the actual plot. But more interesting things happen in Rohan.
I struggled
for
with,
instance.
I think that was in The Return of the King, is the one where I struggled with that plot line because it got so bleak,
Mhm.
which is like
Yeah.
the point, but it was just like, it was a very serious trudging that I was like, I just want to go back to the happy, the happy
Yeah.
part. Go back
Where-
to
Yeah.
Gondor.
I don't remember where the stopping point. I read it all. When I read Lord of the Rings, I read it through, and so I don't remember exactly where the stopping point is. Is it like him meeting Faramir? Is that where?
At the end of Two Towers?
Is that at the end of Two Towers?
Hmm.
Yes, he meets.
Yeah,
So he
because
meets
they leave off
Faramir.
of him.
Yeah, yeah. They're
Okay.
still with Faramir at the end of Two Towers.
Okay.
Yeah. But that was something that I like so much about the book for Two Towers, was that it showed some reprieve for Frodo and Sam more
Mhm.
frequently than it showed in the book or the
Yeah.
movie. The extended
It-
versions did change a bit from the like theatrical version.
And their
But-
time with Faramir in the book is actually a restful time. It's not a stressful time the
Yes.
way it was in the movie.
Yeah.
They kind of
Yeah,
got the movie kind of got Faramir wrong.
Yeah, that whole kind of storyline was a bit odd. My husband was really off put by Denethor
Yeah,
from
they
the
got
movie.
Denethor wrong too.
Which in the book he's still crazy, but you get a little bit more of a explanation as to why.
Yeah.
I
He's
don't
he's relatably crazy. Like he's so he's so distraught, and the thing that he thought was helping him was actually making him descend more into madness.
Right.
But like they kind of in the movie they minimize the whole Palantir thing that he's got.
That's one of my huge complaints about how they handled that. Like they didn't put it's the what?
It's the tomatoes. Isn't it?
Tomatoes.
I do hate that.
Yeah, hold
I hate
the
that tomato.
nightshades. Hold the
Yeah.
nightshades.
Yeah, as far as like the visuals, I hate the tomato, and I hate all the way back in Fellowship after Frodo gets stabbed and Arwen brings him to Rivendell, and they do the weird thing where it's like Frodo's head here and Elrond's head here, and they're kind of like floating. He's like saying a blessing in Elvish, and it's so fake and like 90s looking. It just doesn't fit with the ethos at all.
I thought you were going to mention the fish. With Gollum eating the fish.
Where he like rips the fish open.
Yeah, kind of bites into it, I think.
Oh, maybe. Yeah. No, I was fine with that.
Oh, okay. Yeah,
Gollum's sushi is fine.
Yeah, the weird like ethereal like elvish visions are kind of
little cringe.
I think that's something that's hard to do if you've seen the movies, like when you read the books, to like not put in your head.
Yeah.
Fortunately,
it's a 2CV.
Great movies. Like on the whole, can you imagine if the Lord of the Rings movies were terrible?
No, yes.
I could imagine if the Silmarillion was terrible and it's called Rings of Power.
But it's not even the same story. Like it's just half of it's kind
like
of made
fan
up.
fiction.
Yeah,
it's a good fan fiction show.
Yeah.
Except it's fans that don't like Tolkien.
Yeah. I absolutely love the Lord of the Rings movies, but I'm able to shelf them separately.
Yeah.
Like they're adjacent, but I'm not such a purist that like I'm gonna nitpick the
Mhm.
Lord of the Rings movies and like hate everything about it because they are so well done and they're so epic.
Oh yeah. Epic. The soundtrack, the visuals are
Oh
amazing.
yeah.
You
Soundtrack.
can tell Peter Jackson loves the story, and really, you're never going to get a 1-to-1 adaptation. Even if they made it a TV series, you're still not going to get the book in a visual form. It's going to have to be adapted, and it was an adaptation done by somebody who really, really loves the story, and
Yeah.
I'll always be grateful to Peter Jackson for that.
But somebody who didn't appreciate Tom Bombadil.
Right. But it's kind
Shameful.
of a
Or the Barrel
weird.
Whites.
It's a weird.
Tom Bombadil is weird.
I
Yeah.
love Tom Bombadil.
I love
People would
Tom
be like,
Bombadil, but
"What is
it
going
would
on?"
have been if you didn't know, if you were me watching that, having never read the book, I'd be like, was this guy on drugs?
He's
I
singing.
don't know.
He can't stop singing.
Yeah. I
And
think
we
that's the
don't want him
only
to stop
like
singing. His singing
Yeah.
keeps things rolling. So
I think
sing
that's
on,
the
Tom
only
Bombadil.
redeeming quality. Well, there's a couple of redeeming qualities in the Hobbit movies. Not many,
Not many,
but
but there are some.
that they put Beorn in there. It was like kind of like a little bit of a Tom Bombadil moment.
Yeah.
That I was
He was
glad that
cool.
they had that. Even though they did it wrong,
Yeah.
I was just glad that he was included.
I was glad he was there.
But the CGI in that, ugh. Anyways, we have gone way off from the space trilogy.
I will forever
but
blame what's his name? I always want to say Benicio del Toro. It's not him, it's the other guy. The guy who directs movies, not stars in them. Guillermo del Toro. He was the one who started the Hobbit movies and then backed out to do another project, and then they called in Peter Jackson to back cleanup. And so he was stuck with like half of Del Toro's work and had to splice in his own work to try to make it happen.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's a weird choice.
They should have him redo The Hobbit then before he does Lord of the Rings.
Yeah. Yep.
Because
Definitely.
they could really do a better job. I liked the dwarves and I liked their songs they sang.
Yes.
I think they did a pretty good job with that.
Yeah.
And the dragon smog was pretty good.
The tune that they put
the
and
horses,
get
like there's better horses and like Ocarina of Time, Nintendo 64, Zelda. Like just put that in there.
I think of the Hobbit movies when people talk about them, the thing that I remember is I don't even remember which movie it is, but there's a battle and it's with the elves and they're on like a creek or something and they're just like sliding all over the place and it's just insane. In a bad way.
Yeah.
There's like rocks are falling and Legolas is somehow able to like walk across the falling rocks to go like
I think you know exactly which battle I'm talking about.
Yes.
Makes
like,
no sense.
This isn't the Matrix.
Yeah, even the fun little barrel river scene.
Yeah.
Like my kids love that. They thought it was hilarious, but they're also entertained by YouTube videos, so I mean they're just not very critical.
Not high art.
But it was very cheesy. So
in the future we're gonna have like these young kids that are gonna grow up and they're gonna have videos where they're talking about, hey, we're going to talk about the best unboxing videos of the 2020s.
Yeah.
You know what would be cool? I think you could redeem The Hobbit this way. If you take the film of The Hobbit, the various films, but you turn them into a VR experience and you can choose to be in the place of one of the characters. And then they just kind of resplice the footage so that you're in a barrel going down the falls. Or you're in the Battle of the Five Armies and you die on the field or whatever.
They need to turn that into like a Universal Studios ride.
Oh man, barrels, so cool.
The barrels, that'd be fun.
Yeah, I'd ride that thing all
fun.
day.
Yeah, and the whole stupid storyline with
Toriel,
the love story.
Yes,
the dwarf elf romance that never would ever happen ever.
You won't find that in Paralandra.
I'm trying to remember. I'm trying to remember the god of the space trilogy. Malindil, I think was his name. Thank Malindil that never happens.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm gonna
That
Google
name, that name, like I kept
sounds
thinking
bad.
like of Malice. Yeah, it does sound bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
he
It's
should
like
have run
C.S.
that
Lewis
by
should
Tolkien.
he should have
Yeah.
known better.
Urendi
Sorry,
Malil.
Lewis. Yeah, Malel deal. It sounded like bad, like yeah.
Mhm.
I kept waiting for him to be a bad guy through
Yeah,
that book.
yeah.
Like you're
He's
gonna
got
turn
Mal in the
bad.
name. Mal means bad. That should have been the name of Divine or whatever.
Yes. Yeah. That's weird too.
I will say, so one last thing, and then we can wrap it up. But I in the description of the Hrasa, which are like the seal-like people, I'm like,
Mhm.
oh, they rock. I'd go play with them all day long.
Yeah.
Like gigantic seals who also write poems.
I thought they were like kind of like otters, like sea otters. Like
Something
that's
like
what
that.
I kind of
Yeah.
envisioned.
I've
But
seen
at first
some.
not. They looked more like Bigfoot in my mind until later.
Ooh. Yeah, I cheated and looked up some pictures, and they do people make them look more ottery than sealy. But it was also
Those are
interesting.
not two things that are insanely far from each other.
No, I guess that's true. Although seals are a little
more
more
their
slick and less
legs.
hairy.
The
Well, yeah,
legs thing.
they have differences.
I just can't
Yeah.
imagine like a seal with like flippers doing what some of them do with their spears and stuff.
I enjoyed on the audiobook, I enjoyed listening to the narrator say the word now over and over again.
Yeah.
Which is the word for a
Hanau.
sentient being, and it's
Hanau.
HNAU. And I'm like, this poor guy. This poor guy. It's like describing a bent now.
Yep.
No, I turned out to love that book. I was riveted. So
I
I'm
listened
excited
to
do the
that book
rest.
while painting, so like the room that I was painting when I listened to it is like forever out of the Silent Planet memories for me.
Yep.
That was pretty
Yeah.
fun.
I
But
always have
I really do
location
like the
based.
second book better.
I figured, yeah, looking back on it, like all of like there was so much showing instead of telling that had to be done. I think in order to just establish the world and then go to tell the better stories. That's what it seemed like. So
Yeah, the Paralandra, like, yeah, I can't wait till you read that because I want to talk about that one. But
I'll probably go ahead and start it, even though it's not on the challenge list. But I still have 3 more books to finish for
Just do
the
it.
challenge.
Right.
yeah, do the second one soon, and then you can be like me and just wait to do the hideous.
Yeah.
That hideous
Consider
thing.
this peer pressure.
Live and on air. Fine. I have
Yeah.
to succumb now.
Yeah.
It's like the double dog dare.
Literally everyone else is doing it.
Double pod dare you to start the next book.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for your time this evening. It's always fun to go over what we've been reading, and appreciate it. Thank you all very much. And until next time, may Monway keep you in the one, and peace out.